Okay, and welcome students who are taking Math for Business and Finance and Math applications, and we are doing the assigned homework problems from the digital study guide. And in this set of videos, we're talking about the odd numbered problems for the drill problems. So as always, as always, if you don't understand something, feel free to rewind, watch the video again. If you still don't understand how the answers arrived at, feel free to contact an instructor either by phone or email. We are in the home stretch here, and it's kind of odd because I was just thinking about how since we're in the last chapter now, how chapter 1 was the easiest chapter, and now chapter 22 seems to be the most difficult chapter. So that's just the way the progression of education is. But with that said, let's get started and see how long it'll take for us to punch out the rest of these here assigned homework problems. All right, get to the next slide here. There we go. And let me get my pen. Okay, so it says here for problem 22-1, calculate the mean to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so in calculating the mean, again, that's just an average. So we're taking the 14, the 8, the 6, and the 2. We're adding that up. That's 20, that's 30. Okay, and there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 instances, 4 pieces of data. So we take the 30 and we divide it by 4, and we end up with, let's see, that's 7 is 28, decimal there, that's 750. Okay, so our mean is equal to 750. Okay, nothing more than an average of those numbers. Okay, that's what a mean is. Right, next problem, calculate the mean to the nearest hundredth. Again, we're just going to add these up. 55, 83, 66, 92, and 108, 93. So that's 6, 8, 18, 26. That's 21, 13. So we have 2, 31, 68, and we only have 3 pieces of data. 1, 2, 3. So we divide by 3. That's 7, 21, 21, that's 7, it's 21, 6, that's 2, 6, that's 8, 4. So our answer is $77.24. That's our mean. 6 divided by 3. Huh, interesting. Oh, no, my mistake. It's 23. Right? That's 23. Right? 3 into 8 goes 2 times. So 77.23. Okay, 22-5. Okay, calculate the grade point average. A is a 4, B is 3, C is 2, D is 1, F is 0 to the nearest tenth. Okay, so calculating the grade point average, because we're talking about credits, this becomes even though this says the grade point average, this is like a weighted average, right? So for the grades, a B is worth 3, a C is worth 2, a D is worth 1, and A is worth 4, and the B is worth 3. So what we have is this 3 times 3 gives us 9, right? We have to do that because of the weighting, and because we have biology having 4 credits here. It's not as simple as, if these were all 3s, we could just take the 3, 2, 1, 4, and 3, add them up and divide by 5. But because we have a different number of credits here, we have to do it as a weighted average. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, 4 times 4 is 16, and 3 times 3 is 9. So now we add all of those up, and what do we get here? 43, okay, and then we take the 43 and we divide that by, okay, so we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 16. Okay, we have 16 credits there. So 16 into 43 is 2, that's 32, that's 11. Let's see, that's 16 into that. Let's see, 7 is 6, 36, 3, 96. So that gives me a 4, 14, 140. So that's about 9, 9-ish, 8-ish, doesn't matter because we're rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, so if we have 2.68 or 2.69, we're rounding up to 2.7 as our GPA. Okay, so that's our GPA for the grade point average for this particular problem. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick aside here. Now, go ahead and copy all of that down because I'm going to, since we're talking about grades, I'm going to discuss how Penn Foster calculates the grades. Okay, so let's say you have lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4. Okay, and then you have a final exam or a proctored exam. Okay, now let's say you have a grade of, say, 70, and then you retake the exam and you get a grade of, say, an 85. So this is the first try and this is your retake. And then let's say you get an 85 and then you get a 90. Let's say you get an 80 and an 80 and let's see here, 85. Let's say you get a 85 and then you get a 95. Okay, and then on your final exam, you end up with a grade of, say, 70. Okay, right. So for multiple choice lesson exams, we all know that we take the exam and we're able to retake the exam to be able to get a higher grade. So the lesson exams are equal to 2/3 of your grade, and the final exam or proctor exam is equal to 1/3. Okay, so 2/3 and 1/3 make 3/3. Okay, so if we're going to average out our 4 lessons, so we have 85 plus 90 plus 80 plus 95, and that gives us 350. And we're going to divide that by 4 because there's 4 exams. So divide by 4, and I end up with an 87.5. Okay, so that's my lesson average, all right? That's my lesson average, and that makes up 2/3 of my grade, right? So because it makes up 2/3 of your grade, you take 87.5 and you add it again, 87.5. You double it because that's 2/3 of the grade. And then you're going to, because your final exam makes up 1/3, you add in whatever you get for your final exam. Okay, so that's 0. It's 14, 15. That's 16, 17, 24. So you have 245, and since it's 3/3, you divide that through. You divide whatever you get for that total into 245. You divide it by 3. So that gives you an 81 point, let's see, 3 into 5, so 20, like an 81.6 is approximately your final grade for that particular subject, and an 81 ends up being a B. Okay, and then you can use that B just like you did here in order to find out what your GPA is. Okay, so with all of that, that's an example of how your grade is calculated. Now, let me just erase all of this and spend the rest of this video just going over one last little bit of an example. And I'm doing this because you are in math and you're going to have quite a few more subjects after this. Okay. Let's say that your lesson average is, let's say it's an 80. Okay. Now, remember, your lesson average is 2/3, and your proctor or final is 1/3. Okay. So if your lesson average is 80, all right, well, let's talk about how many. I like to think in terms of points. If 3/3, your grade is made up of 3/3, and passing is 70, that means you multiply 70 by 3, which means you need 210 points in order to be able to pass the subject. Okay? Now, let's say your average is 80, all right, and that makes up 2/3. Okay, so you have 160 points so far. If you need 210 to pass and you get 160, okay, that means you only need 50 points on your final exam or your proctor exam to pass. Okay, because 160 plus 50 gives you the 210, which is the passing grade. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to your lesson average, or maybe I should have, let me back up. I'm not making the point I really want to make here. Let's say your lesson average is 70. Okay. Or let's make it 75. Okay, 75. Okay, so you're going to multiply that by 2, which means you have 150 points. So if you take your 210, which is passing, and you subtract out the 150 points, you can get a grade of a 60. Now, 60 is failing, okay? But if you get that grade of 60, even though your final exam or the proctor exam is a failing grade, you're still able to pass the subject because you ended up with the full 210 points. But now here's the rub, okay? And I mean, this is not a hard and fast thing. This is just a subjective opinion on my part from grading proctor exams. I find that most students get on their proctor exam or their final, they get about 80% of whatever their lesson average was. 80% of 75 is about a 56, maybe a little bit more, 50. Well, let me do the math. 75 times 80%. Let's see, 75 times 80%. Come on, 75 times 0.8. Now that ends up being exactly a 60. Let me erase that. That ends up being exactly a 60. Okay, but notice I had said that's the most, and remember, it's just a subjective opinion. The most that you're going to get is an 80%. It doesn't mean that, that's the highest you're going to get. I mean, there are students who actually get, better than their lesson average on their proctor exams, okay? But generally, and I can go to Las Vegas and bet on this all day and make a fortune. I would bet that students will score less than 80% of their lesson average, and I would make a ton of money. Now, remember, I'm talking about a maximum here of a 60, right? 80% of 75 is 60. Well, they're going to get less than, right, the 60. So that means they're going to get a 55 or a 50, and they're going to fail the subject. Okay. Now, here's the point I want to make. If we take into consideration, remember it's subjective, that students are going to get 80% of their lesson average on their proctor exam, then what that means is it behooves the student to try to get to do as well as they possibly can on their lessons. Okay, so let's say the student was getting 70 and then retaking and get a 75, or get a 65 and retake and get a 75. Okay, if they focus a little bit more, and let's say they answer one question more correct on each one of those exams, and it bumps their lesson average up to an 80, all right, just by getting one more question correct on each exam. Now we multiply by 2, and that gives me 160. I take my 210 points less 160, which means now I only need a 50, okay, on the final exam. And sure, on the proctor exam, now sure, it's a failing grade of 50, right? But even though it's failing, because I have a higher lesson average, I'm able to pass the subject. Now here's the rub. 80% of 80, right? 80 times 80% is a 64, or about, let's say, a 65. Okay, 65 is still a failing grade, but by just getting that one extra question correct, subjectively, you're going to be able to score the 65 or the 60 or the 55 or the 50 and still pass the subject. So what I'm saying is by doing better on your lesson exams, and remember, you have the ability to retake those exams and to be able to get the higher grade. So if you really, really focus, the higher your lesson average is, the more stress and pressure it takes off of you when it comes time to do the proctor exam. I mean, look at the numbers. If you get let's say you're able to average, instead of averaging a 75, let's say you're able to boost your average up to a 90, okay, on your retakes. You multiply that by 2, that's 180. 180 from 210 means you only need a 30 on your proctor exam. And to be honest with you, if you're getting an average of 90 in your lessons because you're studying and you're focusing on the material, then it's almost a no-brainer to get a 30, because 90 times 80%, you're going to get around the 70, 75 at the most on your final exam, on that proctor exam. So you see how, just by virtue of having a better lesson average, you're retaining the material better, and it makes it almost like a no-brainer to be able to get a 30 on your final exam, your proctor exam, and pass the subject. So I realize I went off on another tangent here because this question was about calculating your grade point average, but I wanted you to be able to see how the grades in Penn Foster are calculated and the ramifications for getting a much better lesson average. Okay, so really focus on your retakes and try to do as well as you possibly can, because it just takes so much stress and pressure off. I mean, every week I speak with a student. I'm worried about the final exam. I'm worried about the proctor exam. What if I don't do so well? Well, you can not do so well as long as you have a much better lesson average. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop, and I will pick up with the next problem, drill problem, in the next video.